Hello and welcome to our October 17th program. If you notice the beautiful trees reflecting on the water on your way in today like I did, you'll know how important this topic is because we're going to talk about the other side of water. Our program is sponsored by the League of Women Voters Grand Traverse Area in partnership with the Traverse Area District Library, which hosts us in this facility, and with the Traverse Area Community Media, which offers technology and media support. Our topic today is titled, What's the Latest Stink? Lovely. About regulating septic systems. A panel discussion focused on the damage to our groundwater caused by leaking septic systems. Our League of Women Voters has a national position, our local and state, working on these issues also for the protection of Great Lakes, inland lakes, streams, rivers, and wetlands through programs and policies that reflect the interrelationships of water quality, both ground and surface water, and that address the potential depletion or pollution of water supplies. I am League member Eunice Crockett, your moderator for today's program. Our panel is brought to you by our League's Natural Resources Committee. I was asked to especially recognize Dave Buto.
Close enough.
I'm working on it. Okay. In doing the extraordinary work of bringing such a talented panel to us for the presentation today. Ann Magoon will take questions on note cards, if you have some as we go along, for the panelists when they are done with their presentation. This is the first time the League or our tech support has done both a streamed person who will be here beaming in as well as our two live participants. The League of Women Voters is a national nonpartisan organization. The League does not endorse nor oppose candidates or political parties, but does work to obtain and distribute information to the public about candidates and their views. The League promotes the informed and active participation of all citizens in government. It works to increase the understanding of major public policy issues through education and advocacy. Membership in the League is open to women and men of all ages, and we offer a special discount for students. Our program today is being shown on channel 189 with Spectrum Cable in Northwest Lower Michigan, and the program is shown on Traverse Area Community Media website live stream, www.tacm, and Community TV Now. And what this means is that as a studio audience, we have to have our etiquette regarding turning off telephones and realizing that you are part of a live audience. So we thank you for that. We are welcoming our guests today. And I have 3 bios to read for you. It is very interesting, all of the organizations and work that is in process for this. As you will find out, Michigan has no state laws regarding the septic systems, which is startling. We're the only state, I believe. Beth Clausen, who will be beaming in or is here, a Michigan State University Extension educator since 2001. She educates and consults in natural resources, water quality, and sustainability. She received her Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources from Grand Valley State University with a minor in environmental studies from Western and her Master's of Science in Business Administration from Central Michigan University. She is currently state coordinator of the Michigan Master Naturalist Program and supporting the Michigan Conservation Stewards Program locally. She serves to locally coordinate programs for natural shoreline landscaping and septic system on-site wastewater treatment and maintenance education for homeowners. And Beth will be covering, according to what I have, the does Michigan need a statewide septic system law? Tricia Denton is the president of the League of Women Voters of Leelanau County. She is an active member of their Energy and Natural Resources Committee and serves as the Michigan League's representative on the Oil and Water Don't Mix Coalition Steering Committee, the League of Women Voters Michigan Advocacy Committee, and as a League of Women Voters member of the League Lake Michigan Region Board. Tricia is chair of the Leelanau County Watershed Collaborative Body, Leelanau Clean Water. As the stewardship ambassador for the Glen Lake Association, she specializes in helping individuals and businesses incorporate best management practices for protecting water quality in their homes, including residential on-site wastewater treatment and septic systems. In 2019, she was awarded the Northern Michigan Environmental Action Council's Environmentalist of the Year Award. Tricia holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Physical Geography from Michigan State University. And Seth Phillips, to balance out our Michigan rivalries, is a graduate of University of Michigan with a degree in Natural Resources. He retired after 30 years with the Departments of Natural Resources, Environmental Quality and Transportation, managing various environmental programs and policy issues, including hazardous waste, solid waste and recycling, field compliance enforcement, stormwater management, and environmental policy issues for transportation. He is currently the Kalkaska County Drain Commissioner, a director and former president of the Manistee Lake Association, and on the board of directors of the Michigan Resource Stewards. He is also a member of the Septic Working Group of the Elk River Chain of Lakes Committee, a program of the tip of the Mitt Watershed Council. Seth has been working on septic regulatory issues for nearly 20 years, working on local point of sale regulations and development of a statewide septic code. So these are our three panelists. Beth will begin, and we are so glad to have all three of you here with your expertise.
Thank you for inviting me to participate today. Just a word about rivalries. Michigan State and University of Michigan do a lot of partnerships together. So I have the Dearborn Interpretive Center hosts the Master Naturalist training every other year, and of course Sea Grant we share with U of M. So there's a lot of ways in which we overlap. It's just the football teams that have the rivalry, right? So thank you for inviting me again. My name is Beth Clausen, and I have been with Michigan State University Extension for 22 years. And so I just thought I would start out a little bit by talking about what Extension is and what my role as an outreach educator is with Extension. And that way it'll give us some foundation about where we're going with answering our questions about laws. And so what are we and what do we do? Who are we, MSU Extension? Well, we are a national outreach education program that is funded by the federal, state, and local dollars. And we are associated with land-grant colleges. There is extension programs in every state of the union, including Guam. And we are an outreach program for that university, and we take that information, we take the research information that the university generates with all their researchers, and we convert that into information that can be used by homeowners and businesses. And originally, of course, land grants were established, or the Cooperative Extension Service was established in 1914 through the Smith-Lever Act, which formalized that. They had been doing that work previously, but it was not formalized across the nation until then. And then, of course, we provide education in several broad categories as needed by the community. And so when society changes, when it first started, it was mostly agricultural, it helping homeowners, and 4-H, and then of course the society changed, and then of course we had to change with it. And so we have in Michigan State has in our extension service, we have Agriculture and Agribusiness Institute. We have Children, Youth, and Families Institute. We have Health and Nutrition Institute. And we have Community Finance and Environmental Institute. And so what do? We help people to improve their lives through an education process that applies knowledge to critical issues, needs, and opportunities. Here's our website address, and in the event that you want to go visit our webpage. But briefly, we respond to modern needs of community. We respond rapidly to changes and emerging issues, and we teach to new laws and changing governance policies. And so in the first image, you're going to see 4-H, of course. That's self-explanatory. Everybody knows what 4-H is. They just don't know the rest of us, right? Agriculture, farming, food, farm markets, product sales, product development, how to actually run the business of running a farm. And then, of course, we have businesses, which covers small businesses, product development, innovation, and many more things that are related to businesses on top of that, and including facilitation, etc., leadership. We also have community. Community includes government public policy, tourism, zoning. That includes our Charette Institute and our LeadNet Institute if you need to have some advice or help with facilitating a program or an emerging issue. And then, of course, we're looking at family and family health. That includes also their housing and financials. We have money management programs. We have programs for folks to help them prevent them from losing a home if they have an economic downturn. We have the food and health, which picks up Serve Safe, which is training for restaurants. We have fitness programs, vaccine programs, the SNAP education programs, the FNET programs, which are federally funded to go into schools, deserving schools, etc. Lawn and garden, of course, which is kind of self-describing. Everything you want to know about gardening, yard care, soils, pollinator champions. And of course, that also houses our Master Gardener program. And then finally, where I'm housed in the Natural Resources program, we cover forestry, water quality, inland lakes, sustainability, composting, on-site wastewater conservation, which also includes the Master Naturalist and Conservation Stewards programs. We also house the Michigan Natural Features Inventory folks and the Sea Grant programs. So we do quite a bit. And then let's move on then to the topic of our day. And mostly we're going to cover a little bit of background about waste management or human waste management, or I should say human manure or humanure, right? Because that's what on-site waste management systems do. They manage the human waste. And so, and then of course, we're going to answer our question today, about legislating statewide legislation and why that's important. But before we start, let's play a little fun game. Let's play Find the Septic System. So these are homes along the lakeshore. They're packed in pretty tightly. Many times they started out as small cottages, and then the cottage was either added onto or torn down and a larger home put in its place. And many times the septics did not enlarge as they went along. They're limited space. You got to have space to put in a septic system. And so then we look at water quality as we wonder what's going on. And then, so then now when we're looking at these septic systems and the need to enlarge them, we have to go to our county governance to get it permitted. We have to go to our township governance to see if zoning regulations will allow it. Sometimes we find out that county and township departments don't always want to play well together. And then, and then we're looking at, well, what's the statewide guidance for replacing cottages with larger homes? When we find out that if they are adding extra bedrooms or not, or adding rooms that they're saying is not a bedroom, but is. And then of course, there's the grandfathered cottages. And when we talk about point of sale, generally when they're going to build a new house or sell a property, that's at the point when that septic gets looked at. Is it the appropriate size for what's there, or is it inspected before they sell it to the new homeowner, if that health department or health district has that as part of their code. Not all of the counties do, or all the districts do. If they're grandfathered in, if it's a cottage that's been there, and I don't know about you, but most of the lake folks that I know inherited their cottages because they're expensive, and so they get passed down through multiple generations. Then what we have is septics that are many tens of years old, if not 100 years old or more, and they maybe have never been replaced or upgraded. And this is a problem because we have no laws or guidance that dictates how old a septic should be before it must be replaced. These kinds of things. We also cover public education about that. So just a little information for you about that. In the nation, there is 1.3 million homes that are on independent wastewater systems. In Oakland County, I'm going to say, no, let me rephrase that. In Michigan, we have 1.3 million homes that are on septic systems. Oakland County alone has 80,000 septic systems. They also have 387 lakes, and 70 of those lakes are yet unnamed. So how do we manage all this development around all these lakes? And so part of what I do is education to that, to help folks understand what they need to do in owning their own homes, what's part of the maintenance for their homes. So as an extension educator, we teach to many of our laws and regulations and best management practices. So as new laws are passed, it is also part of our role then to continue to teach to that new information. And of course, currently we do have a need for that. Okay, so a little bit of an overview of how a septic tank works. This is a super simplified image. Many septic tanks are divided in 2 or even 3 settling parts, depending upon the number of bedrooms in a home. Septic tanks are sized based on the number of bedrooms in the home, not bathrooms in the home. And this is because it depends on how many people can live in the house. You can have 15 bathrooms and only 2 bedrooms, and that means only about 4 people are going to live in that house. But if you have a 3 or 4 bedroom house, now you're going to have 6, 8, possibly even 10 people living there. And it doesn't matter how many bathrooms you have. That's how much more water is going into that system. So this one, of course, works with, in this most simple way, the water comes in. You can see in the pointer to the left, the water comes in from the house. It settles in to the tank, and it will separate there. The sludge or solids will fall to the bottom. The soaps and oils and lighter materials will float to the top, called scum. And then everything else is liquid sewage that is in between. And with that liquid sewage, we call that effluent. And there's generally a couple of access panels at the top for inspections. And that liquid effluent then goes out to the drain field, or it's pumped up into a mound system, depending upon the situation that it is situated on. And then, of course, after that's done, they're instructed, the homeowner's instructed to plant grass on top. And in some areas they're not, and in some areas they're instructed to put in a ground level access, which might include a larger access tube, so there will be no digging to find the lid to the septic tank. But in some areas they're not. So this sort of outlines the difficulty with me trying to teach to different areas of the state what has to happen with their septic tank. And the best I can do is say you have to refer back to your health department for the guidance on what the regulations are in your community, which is challenging because I'd like to be able to just teach right to it so homeowners can know what to expect. So here's the most typical layout system for a 3-bedroom home. You're going to see, again, your septic tank or your settling tank for your on-site wastewater. There's going to be a distribution box in there, and that box, it helps for the water to spread out into the drain field, which is various tubes. And these tubes can be laid out in configurations that will fit your site. But they certainly do have to meet minimum sizes based on predicted water inflows. And so, again, that's predicted by your local health department for what their rules are. When the septic system fails, they usually fail in 2 places. They'll either fail with the pipes being clogged because solids get flushed into the drain field, and that will plug up all the pores, and the effluent won't drain out properly, and instead will percolate up to the surface, and or it's plugged in some way. That might be an improper installation. And so what's happening in these tanks is that we have anaerobic bacteria working on the effluent in there, or the waste, to break it down. And then when it hits the drain field, then we have aerobic bacteria to help continue that decomposition process to break that down. Then the water filters through the soil, which is a very effective filtration system. And then generally it's clean water that then rejoins the water table. But when failures happen, clean water doesn't always join the table, or it will run off the surface into a surface body of water, into local wetlands. If the soil is wet, then they're going to request that you build a mound system, giving it at least 4 feet for that effluent to drain through a filter sand that's below it before it hits the ground. And then, of course, always the standard installation, it requires planting it with grass. Grass, nothing can eat grass. It's expensive to maintain. And as we move into climate change and water quality issues, we're like, is grass really the best answer? Well, it's the safest answer because it has shallow roots. It's not going to interfere with the operation of the system. But there has been new research, and we found that we can move into something better. So just a little side note, each week in the United States, we mow an area 8 times the size of New Jersey in just lawn. It can't, if nothing can eat it, but it's hungry for fertilizer and water inputs. Now, when you put in a new drain field, the one thing they tell you not to do is overwater the lawn over your drain field, because that'll fill it with too much water and it'll become anaerobic. But if you have a nice lawn and you have an irrigation system installed, that's not going to happen. You're watering your lawn. And they tell you not to compact or traffic over your drain field or septic tank. But if you have a lawn, you're walking on it or riding a lawnmower on it every single week to mow that lawn. And then you come in for additional applications for fertilizer or other things, or lawn raking. And the next thing you know, now we're compacting the top of our drain field just simply because of the weekly traffic that's going on it. And that's counterintuitive to maintaining a healthy septic system. So maybe, I think we need to rethink, is lawn the best choice for our regulations? Some other choices that do work are alternative landscaping. We know that if you use native dry prairie plants, these are plants, think xeriscaping. These are plants that do not like water. And so you plant them, you can plant these. It doesn't have to be a prairie, but you can put gardens around them. If you plant these near your drain fields, they're not going to want to get wet. They're going to stay away from your pipes. So you're not going to have a problem with roots in the pipes, which is the biggest challenge for planting around drain fields. No roots in pipes. keep all trees away, keep all shrubs away, keep all vines away. Those are all going to go into the root, create massive root systems and cause havoc with your drain pipes. But generally, what happens when we're using native plants is that they're not only creating deeper root systems, they don't require inputs. They don't require fertilizer. They don't require additional water. And they help the water drain from our drain fields. So we have some good studies that show that these are effective and give us a great alternative. But we don't have any laws or regulations that say this is a good option. We just have some good research that says this is a good option. So this is part of the challenge of not having laws across the state, consistent laws and recommendations. So what is my primary message then? As far as maintaining your septic system, of course, you want to make sure it's regularly inspected and pumped, generally 3 to 5 years for a family of 4 to 6. If there's just a couple people living in the house, not so often. You want to take a few precautionary practices, such as point of sale inspections. And this actually helps prevent selling a bad septic to a new homeowner, which is super common in the state. Don't flush anything. Don't wash anything down your drains. Just use toilet paper and body waste. And that's all those things are designed for. Those flushable wipes, they say they're flushable, but they don't break down. Towels don't break down. Tissues don't break down. Toilet paper is specifically designed to break down very quickly. That's the only paper they want in the septic. And then, of course, regular maintenance can give you decades of reliable service, and then protect your system from invasive plant roots. So you want to make sure that anything that likes water is not planted near your septic tank. Anything that does not like water or prefers high and dry soils is okay to plant near your septic tank and drain fields. No trees, no shrubs, no vines. Sort of in a nutshell, that's the whole thing. And as you can see, we have some inconsistency with some information. And then, of course, we're ready with Extension to update our education for any new laws that comes our way. Currently, we tell people to seek the advice of their environmental health departments because we can't speak to what the state laws are because they're not consistent across the state. I have an example that was just shared with me this week of somebody who lives down in Berrien County not having the same regulation as somebody in Cass County or Van Buren County, although all three of us are in the same sort of quad of us share the same health department district. So it's challenging. And so we tend to avoid speaking directly to what local regulations might be. Another example is I once wrote an article to be published in the Oakland County area, and my article had to be reviewed by the Oakland County Health Department first to make sure that it was not speaking about anything that the health department doesn't have for regulations on their septics. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge when I can't write a statewide article about managing or maintaining your septic system without having it approved by different health districts or health departments first, in case I might say something that they don't have as part of the regulations. It adds an additional burden onto those of us that teach to it. And then again, yes, we're ready to update our wastewater education to any new regulations that might come. And we do recognize this is not the first time we've tried to get this regulation passed at the state level. And then of course I always put this on the end of all of our programs because we just want all of our clientele to know that we are an affirmative action, equal opportunity employer, and that we are open to all of our programs and all of our materials are open to all and everyone. And that's all I have for my presentation.
I will take a local kind of narrative approach to my part of the program. I'm going to take you along on a little journey in Leelanau County. It's, I think, easier with water to remember that we're all in this together and that it's going to take all of us. But at the same time, we have this minefield of, township and county and state, and it can be difficult in a state as diverse as Michigan is, with soil types, our abundance of water, differences in permeability, is what we call it in the science world. And one of the barriers to uniform minimum standard for septics has been that diversity of our state. So any effective solution, I think, is going to require some level of local control and input, but we certainly need a minimum standard for our state and the infrastructure and funding that comes from an economy of scale on the state level. Michigan is a state of home rule laws. We have 83 counties. How many townships? In 1,200 townships. There are, and we like our independence. So it can be a difficult landscape to navigate. So in Leelanau County, just over 20 years ago or so, there was a movement to create, I would say, a time of transfer well and septic inspection ordinance. Our members of our elected bodies became aware at that time that this was a significant issue that had no oversight. Tip of the mitt likes to say, once it's in the ground, we never look at it again. And that was the case in Leelanau County. And our joint health department with Benzie County did have a point of sale inspection requirement. So for more than 20 years, Leelanau County's health board and health department was operating two different systems. There were, at that time, there was a task force, I would call it, of the county formed by our Board of Commission called Leelanau Clean Water. That is the watershed collaborative body that I chair today, and that need for coordination of all the stakeholders around water quality issues was identified through the septic issue. The idea was that these experts would get together and make recommendation to the county about how to manage Leelanau's water resources. I would say that body was very effective, but any of you in advocacy know there is a big difference between science and politics or action. Even though we had our neighboring county that was meeting with great success, all the things that they worried about happening didn't happen there, as far as people being unduly burdened with expense of repairing systems? What if we discover too many systems that need repair? What if we don't discover any and it's a waste of taxpayer money? More big government? Neither of those things materialized. But the real, what moved it forward was the politics at the county level always kept it from, one vote shy, always one vote shy. But because we have township government, our townships, this advocacy education was having an impact on the township level. And people who cared about their lake or their water said, we don't have to wait for the state of Michigan. We don't have to wait for Board of Commissioners to, enact something. We can do this here. So starting one township at a time, they began to implement time of transfer well and septic ordinances. What that means is that not only when a property sells, but when it's transferred within a family, there's a requirement made for inspection of the system. Some of the other challenges to implementing a program like that on the township or county-wide basis were, how do you maintain or how do you upscale for the infrastructure to handle that? So our Board of Commissioners eventually, I think, realized we were not going to go away. Be patient in these things. They take time, So after 10 years, we still weren't going away. After 15, we still weren't going away. They were able to take, I would say, baby steps that have made the eventual passage of almost a year ago now, countywide well and septic inspection ordinance. First, they approved some money to digitize our county well and septic records. They were all sitting in paper files. How do you manage a county-wide system without a digital way to access your records? The next step they took was expanding budget for our environmental health department so that they could hire the additional staff it was going to require for these inspections. Our county, Leelanau, has very good installation requirements, well above state standards, and we don't want to let those go. They're customized to our soil types in our county. Even a functioning, well-maintained system that is able to break down bacteria, viruses effectively, there's a limit to the amount of nutrients like phosphorus, nitrogen, that the soils in your area can treat. So there becomes a problem when all the surface area on your soil gets binded with these nutrients. There's nothing left in your soil to absorb those things. The more concentrated on-site septic or human waste treatment is, the more burden you put on your soils to bind with those nutrients. And those have water quality implications too. Phosphorus is the limiting factor for growth in our inland lakes and streams. So now you could be in a situation where you have harmful algal blooms that could pose a public health threat. So these are some of the intricacies that need to be navigated, and why it's been such a challenge for our state, I think, to agree on a minimum standard. But with any good advocacy or marketing program, you need to repeat, repeat, repeat. You need to repeat in a variety of communication channels so that, one day that commissioner says, well, of course, everybody knows that. It becomes the culture. And that's another aspect that really takes time. But I think in Leelanau County, in addition to benefiting from that blue wave that turned a lot of our government had more Democrats than ever before. Leelanau County, for the first time, had a board of commissioners that was tipped by one seat in the favor of the Democratic Party. And that was an issue that they were eager to pass. But even so, it was our Republican representatives that were putting forward these motions early on to build up the infrastructure and systems that we would need to be able to handle a time of transfer well and septic inspection program. The townships that came along first are grateful for the county implementing a countywide program. The townships that had been battling for years to try to pass their own are also grateful. But I think the next logical step really is to have a statewide minimum standard for inspection of these systems once they're installed, and the funding base to be able to help folks out who do need help replacing or fixing a system if it's discovered to be malfunctioning or in need of replacement. We don't want to unduly burden an individual, but when it comes to water, it doesn't stay on your property, right? And is our property really any of our property? We all are sharing this lifeboat that we're on in space. So stick with it, be a part of the solution in helping to design systems that are fair and that protect our environment and our public health. That's it for me.
I talk better standing up. Okay. So I'm going to step back to a slightly larger universe, thinking of this more from the state level, although I've been very involved in these issues locally as well, some of the same battles that Tricia talked about. I did want to add one thing that I don't really have on here yet. The disconnect you mentioned between the science and the politics, this is really an issue where that shows up. Dr. Joan Rose at Michigan State University, who's one of the leading experts in the country on this issue, has done some really significant research. They surveyed every single waterway, every stream in the Lower Peninsula, looking for markers of human fecal waste. And they found them in every single river. And in many of those locations, the only possible source was failing septic systems. In many cases, some of their results actually showed the water exceeding the national standard for total body contact for human fecal waste. Like the stuff that closes the beaches every now and then, same kind of stuff. And none of this is currently being regulated. So we've had a lot of efforts to try to create regulation. Representative Phil Skaggs from the Grand Rapids area has introduced 2 bills to try to move this process forward. And let's see, what's the next button here? There we go. So what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about what these bills contain and what they would do. I think we finally have an opportunity maybe to pass these. There have been a lot of groups we've been working with over the years who have had many of the concerns Tricia talked about that have derailed bills that we've had in the hopper in the past. So this is a political soup process, so you have to kind of find the pathway through, so there'll be some good things and some not so good things that make the bill pass. The bill creates a duty for local health departments to manage this program and to set up qualifications for inspectors, especially if they do their own. It establishes an authority to create an inspection fee that also a per inspection fee that'll go to the state. There's a fund that is created to help run the program, and this is the funding source for it. But the local health departments need money as well, so they get to charge for doing the inspections, which the point of sale program does now anyway. It defines the scope of on-site wastewater systems covered, including alternative systems, not just sort of the traditional septic systems that we're used to dealing with, because there are other alternatives out there. And it defines failure. I don't expect you to read that slide. I'm not going to take you through that slide, but other than the failure that you see in the background, the point of this is the idea of what constitutes failure is a lot more complicated than people think. And in order to make the bill work, we needed to put in a functional definition of all the different things that could constitute failure, so we know when somebody has to fix their system. And so I purposely made that difficult to read because I didn't want you to spend your time reading it, but I wanted to make the point. The bill lays out requirements for construction permits and alternative systems. There is a state health code right now that says what you have to do to build a septic system. This is going to expand the scope of that and address alternative systems, because there have been a growth of alternative kinds of septic systems. It will require inspection of every septic system in the state, something that's never been done, every 5 years. And we understand that 5 years may have to be a negotiable number, because 1.3 million septic systems to inspect by county health departments every 5 years is an enormous workload. The 80,000 systems in Oakland County alone, they'll never be able to handle in 5 years. It also spells out what an inspection must include, all the different things that have to be looked at the tank and the drain field and the plumbing system. It also requires inspections on other stimuli, like if there's a complaint or there's a change in use that's proposed in the property that will increase the use of an existing system beyond what's there now, or if the owner of the property on which a system is located applies for a building permit for construction of additional capacity. So the bill will require that owners whose inspection demonstrates a failure, that big, long, complicated list, has to fix it. And so they're going to have to, if it's just a problem that needs to be pumped, they're going to have to get it pumped within 30 days. If it's a more significant system failure that will require more construction or alteration of the system, they get 6 months within to do that. And there's a civil fine for failure to do the remedy. Big problem we have out there today is when you find a septic system that isn't working, very difficult to take enforcement action if people aren't voluntarily willing to step up and do the right thing. It's been a big challenge. So local prosecutors, the Attorney General can bring cases. It becomes an enforceable statute. Now this one gets controversial. The bill will phase out all the local point-of-sale ordinances. We can't get this bill passed if we don't do this. The point-of-sale thing has been a big thorn in the side of the State Realtors Association, and they have killed every bill so far that doesn't get rid of that. So we understand that local governments aren't always going to want to lose that local flexibility, but we can't get a bill passed if we don't get rid of it. Local governments will have a period of a year to get rid of their ordinances. Counties that have them will have longer phase-out periods, actually 7 years in the bill. I can't give you an answer as to why those two are different other than it's a political process. The bill establishes a technical advisor committee. Again, I'm not going to take you through this whole long list, but it establishes a committee in Eagle whose job it is to develop standards, to create the guidance, to define the qualifications, requirements for inspectors, and the Eagle will be required to promulgate administrative rules in 3 years from enactment to contain all this kind of stuff. It's a big committee, 17 people. That's the whole makeup of the whole thing. Again, you don't need to go through that whole thing unless you're really a masochist. But the point is it's going to have very broad representation from all sorts of different interests in the group in the process. And that's been a problem with this. There are so many players that are affected by doing this kind of work. Realtors, local governments, health departments, septic haulers, wastewater treatment plants where the stuff has to go. That's becoming a problem these days of finding capacity for pumped out waste to go someplace, because land application isn't really always the best thing, especially because what we're finding now in wastewater sludge from septic systems is it isn't just human waste. There's lots of other stuff in there, pharmaceuticals, pathogens, chemicals from detergents and things you use around the house, stuff you flush down the toilet, medicines that people flush away. And septic systems aren't really designed to treat all of that. It's meant to treat bacteria. And it does a pretty good job of that if the system's well designed and maintained. But managing the sludge is becoming problematic in a lot of places. So like I said, Eagle must adopt administrative rules within 3 years of enactment of this bill, assuming it passes, to contain the performance-based standards for both conventional and alternative on-site wastewater systems. And the toughest part, Tricia talked about this a little bit, is the money. This is a very expensive program to implement, as you can imagine, given the scope of work, and it's a statewide effort. So the bill establishes a fund to pay for all of this, to administer, for Eagle to administer the program, for grants to local health departments, because they're the ones that are actually going to be doing all the work, and they're going to have to hire staff and process paper and do enforcement, and that takes a lot of effort. And the other point that we've talked about a lot is the fact that a lot of septic systems belong to homeowners who don't necessarily have a lot of money to invest in fixing their systems. Septic system repair can be very expensive. Or if you find one of those houses like we have near us where the fishing cabin years ago had a septic system of a 55-gallon drum and a pipe, and it's rusted away, and so really there's nothing there anymore, not that there ever was. And so they're going to have to spend money to build an entirely new septic system. So we recognize that enforcement is very difficult if you're trying to enforce against people that can't pay for what you want them to do. When I worked enforcement in the state, I'd run into that problem all the time, and it's like, I don't know what to do with this case. You know, I could throw them in jail, but it doesn't get anything fixed. So the bill contains a grant program to fund with grants or loans to people at this level of, compared to the federal poverty level. And also it's worth noting there already is, although it hasn't been implemented yet, a $30 million loan fund at the state to pay for septic system repairs by homeowners, and we'll figure out how to pull these two things together so that there'll be a lot more money. There's never going to be enough money. I think that's the thing people need to understand going in. That's pick a program, you hear that everywhere, and it's true. This workload is huge. We're talking about compressing years of neglect into a very short time frame. So it's going to be a very difficult thing. And solving the money problem is a big problem in getting the bills passed. So where do we go from here? Representative Skaggs from the Grand Rapids area, who's the primary sponsor of these bills, has been meeting, as I say, with a broad range of interests, the realtors, the county health departments, septic haulers, environmental groups. On this issue, I represent an environmental group. We've all been working on trying to move this forward. There's a working group of environmental group people that have been meeting that work to try to hammer out language and work with Representative Skaggs to try to figure out a path that'll actually get something passed. There were two identical bills that were introduced in the Senate. They are placeholders, and they were meant to demonstrate that the Senate Majority Leader is supportive of what we're trying to do. Representative Skaggs has been working on substitute bills to deal with the results of all this consultation, and we're waiting for him to drop those substitutes into the process. The plan was to do it this fall, in the hopes that they can then get committee hearing and move through. We think the votes are there, but boy, the legislature's been caught up in doing so many other things, trying to find space in their schedule to get this stuff done has been a chore. I have an inquiry into Representative Skaggs' office trying to find out what's going on the scheduling, and not surprisingly, I haven't heard back. So that's what I wanted to tell you about with what's going on with the legislation, and hopefully we'll actually get something passed, and then we can really all talk about the problems of how do we actually do this, because it sounds easy, and boy, is it not easy.
Information. It's been such a, from the local to bigger umbrella vision for the state, and then right down to actually what could be passed possibly, and all the work that's behind this. It's very impressive. Ann Magoon will be handling questions now, and if you want to, she has some questions already. If you have a current question right now that you would like to submit, she will bring that to us in our committee, and we're working on patching Beth in also from the state, from Lansing.
That's actually a camera, I guess.
Thank you, Eunice, and thank you, all three of you, for your presentations, which all complement one another, and there's so much information. It's just hard to get a picture of the whole thing, but you've really, really helped us. So we do already have some questions that have been submitted earlier. Beth, can you hear us? I don't know whether you can see us, but okay, you can hear us. That sounds great. And I do hope that we get some questions here from the audience. I'm going to try to distribute the questions however I think you might want to answer them, but don't hesitate to interject after the first person has had a chance to, if you have something to add to something that has been said. And also don't feel that you need to give a long drawn-out explanation, because we have lots of questions, not because we don't want to hear all the background, but because we have so much. And I'm trying, do we have any questions yet here? Because we want to certainly get to those first, but I'll start with one that we have. I don't know what it is like elsewhere, but I know that there are often beach advisories in Traverse Bay because of water pollution, E. coli. Who decides which bodies of water are monitored? In other words, inland lakes, rivers, and that sort of thing. I think any of you could respond to that, but I'll ask Seth to start with that one. Seth?
Oh, me. I'm sorry. I thought you said Beth. There is a beach monitoring program that Eagle operates for communities that want to get their beaches into the monitoring system, and they do the sampling. Eagle provides support for that. Eagle also just put out a request, it's now too late to submit, for other water bodies that people would like to see sampled in their sampling process. The other avenue for this is what's called the Cooperative Lake Monitoring Program, a state-operated program where locals get trained on how to do sampling in their own individual lakes, and they provide the materials and the lab services. I think they do the lab service to help you get that kind of stuff. But there are a lot of bodies of water in the state that are never sampled. That's just the way it is.
Thank you. Beth, how does a bacteria-based system to break down waste handle viruses such as the recent pandemic?
Oh, that's a very good question. So during the decomposition process with the anaerobic bacteria that work on the first stage, and anaerobic means without air, without oxygen, that's pretty effective, and that does help to break down both viruses, many pathogens, a variety of pathogens, but not all of them, because it requires another level of decomposition. That's where the effluent then go into the aerobic or the drain field, and then it gets another level of decomposition that way with different organisms working on it. All of your decomposition is based on organisms doing the work for us in these systems. And so many of the soil organisms will feed on all of those. And then it filters through the soil itself. And if they don't have, if viruses, for example, don't have the food they need to feed on, which is living in people, they're just going to die naturally. And then add the component that we often flush soap and water down in our septics right along after we flush. And so a lot of times that will also have an impact on that. It will kill the naturally occurring bacteria that does the decomposition, but that stuff tends to rebound faster. So there's a lot of things. We don't advocate planting gardens, like vegetable gardens, for example, over drain fields or near septics because of that purpose. Not all things are broken down as efficiently as we'd like to see them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good question.
Good question. Tricia, what would you like to see included in the legislation that isn't there, or alternatively, is there anything you see that's problematic that you would have trouble with accepting or supporting that legislation?
Easy answer. I think that after all these years and all the input, that the legislation being proposed is very good. I think it's the best solution that we can hope for. I'm in favor. If I get to say that as an individual, I'm not representing the league, but
Letters are always good, though.
Thank you. Beth or Seth, is there anything you want to add? Or
Only that we seem to be getting kind of bogged down in the legislative process right now, so public expressions of support to the sponsor, to the speaker, to the chairs of the committees, suggesting you'd like to see action on these bills is always a helpful thing.
Thank you. Another question, and this one for Beth. Can you talk about what has been accomplished in other states and when other states have enacted statewide legislation on this issue?
That's really specific. I can't talk to other states specifically. I know that I have done research on the things that are implemented in other states, but I really can't give you dates on when they implemented their laws.
Okay.
So-
Michigan is the only state in the nation that does not have a statewide sanitary code for septic systems. In a state is defined by water, as this state is, that's just unimaginable to me. I couldn't give you dates, but every other state in the union has acted on this except us.
and if you want a good overview of that process and what's available nationwide, Tip of the Mitt did extensive research on that, on the septic question. So Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council website,
They
great
actually-
resource.
They actually have a report on the study they did about other states. It's really good.
Thank you. Questions all over the place? Okay, back to some of the specifics about septic systems from a homeowner's point of view. First of all, I'm going to ask, how many of you either live in a place with a septic system or at some time have been in an area? Beth, I don't know whether you can see us, but almost everybody's hand went up.
Yeah, so I'm going to say one of the things that I struggle with is that we have inconsistencies across the state with both sewer systems, septic systems, and clean water or water systems. And part of that is because back in the 60s, they offered some limited grants to communities to install water, sewer, or both. And not all communities had enough matching funds to do both. So in many small communities, they did one or the other. And so, for example, I lived in a community that had Lawrence, Michigan, which is a very small community, a village. They had both, water and sewer. They managed to find that funding. But then in the same county, Van Buren County, where I live, Bloomingdale, for example, put in a sewer system, but everybody has well water. And I live in the community of Gobles, which didn't put in a sewer system, but put in city water. So every home has a septic tank in the whole city. And this is a common problem throughout the state. So another facet to our challenges is the inconsistency across the state about public services that could have been available, but are not. And then as funding dried up and went away, now they're not even obtainable for many communities to even think about putting in public sewer systems. So this is part of our challenge.
Right, thank you. Someone has asked, if I suspect that my neighbor's septic is failing, what can I do? Or who do I report it to? And I guess I would say also, if you suspect your own is failing, what do you do? And I'll ask Trish if you want to handle that one.
Contact your health department, your sanitarian.
Thank
That's
you.
the case
Okay.
everywhere.
And another question we had was, do all counties in Michigan have health departments that oversee on-site wastewater?
They do. Some counties have their own. Some counties, like where I live, it's actually a 10-county district health department. So it's varied, but there is a health department that covers every county in the state.
Both personal and environmental health. They're separate, but they're not.
Thank you. Now, the legislation mentions health departments or registered inspectors. Are the registered inspectors employees of the state, or are those independent private contractors? Beth?
Yes, so a lot of our waste haulers, septic pumpers can do both. Septic installers and pumpers that have got this training and certification and are certified as inspectors can do both. And so there's a lot of areas. I'm not sure that every environmental health department or district has that tolerance or is allowed. I'm not certain if that's a statewide thing or if it's by region. But I do know that that's very common to bring in your pumper and say, can you also inspect it? And you ask them, and they would be certified or licensed by the health department or health district to do that work.
Very few health departments are going to have the resources to do all these inspections themselves. And where those programs exist now, in most cases, they have a list of certified inspectors who are commercial, in most cases septic haulers. Like in my county, there's an actual list that they've gone through and reviewed, and the health department has approved. These are the people that you call to do the inspections, and the health department's role is to review the inspection report.
In Leelanau, our health department maintains control. They're the only one certified to do these inspections. And the issue in our county was one of equity. One person's inspection might not be the same, and so with any legislation, that's another component, that there be a minimum standard of what is entailed in an inspection so you can compare apples to apples.
These bills do seek to do that, to create a base of what all inspections have to be.
Now, can homeowners or landowners test their own septic systems, test, not inspect, but test for water quality in any way? And can they test for nearby lakes or rivers themselves? Or Seth mentioned earlier that there's monitoring statewide, but can somebody go out and test something in their area in any way?
Pretty difficult. Testing your own septic system, since it's all subsurface, is pretty problematic. Testing of surface waters for the E. coli or other things you're looking for requires very specific procedures, containers, documentation. It's not something normally that a homeowner can just go do on their own. Some lakes have people that are capable, or consultants that know how to do it. Our lake, we have a consultant that takes samples, E. coli samples every year. But it's not something that homeowners can generally do themselves.
A really interesting project came out of Leelanau County when we were trying to convince our commission. We had Dr. Joan Rose come and speak to our Board of Commissioners. They still weren't convinced that it was real science. And so we partnered with pre-COVID. A lot of people post-COVID are familiar with quantitative polymers chain reaction, or DNA testing. Was how people tracked COVID in sewage, right? We partnered with a University of Alberta scientist, and we sampled surface water and wells with private homeowner volunteers to test for human gut bacteria. And we did find presence of human gut bacteria DNA in well water and surface water, which means they're connected. It doesn't mean disease causation, but there is connectivity. So that still didn't sway them. But, you know, the more of these things you can build up, and that's the question that came out of that study, was homeowners want to know, I want to know if this stuff's in my drinking water. How do I do this? It's not yet widely available.
It's a very involved testing protocol called qPCR. Actually, there's a new technique called digital drop qPCR that's even more sensitive. We're talking down into parts per trillion. There's a network of universities in the state now that have been formed that have capability to do that analysis. You still need to have somebody who can collect the samples and get the lab space scheduled. But there are some resources out there, not the level we need, but there is some ability to get this kind of analysis done. And it allows you to differentiate human and non-human sourced E. coli, which is really important to this research because we didn't know if it's coming from feedlots or geese, because we have a million geese on our lakes and you all do that. But this lets you mark specific markers so you know that it's human sourced.
Thank you. We're learning so much here. I'll keep going. The idea of sizing septic based on the number of bedrooms in northern Michigan, where so many homes are turned into short-term rentals with 20 people in a 3-bedroom house all summer long, how should this be handled? And I think the questioner is looking for enforcement perhaps as well as determination. How, and that's an overall question about enforcement. And Seth, you said you were involved in that as part of your work.
Different enforcement, but yes. Many communities are starting to wrestle with this question now, and some have adopted local ordinances for short-term rentals. The intent to make sure that not only are they not nuisances, because they're not some big party going on all night, but that the number of people that are going to be staying in those places meet the capacity of the home and the septic system. Absent that, there really is no way to enforce it. So, and that's a growing concern all over northern Michigan as more and more of our lakefront homes become Airbnbs. And that's the solution, is for the local community to adopt an ordinance, and there are model ordinances out there. And then the community would have the responsibility for enforcing their own ordinance.
Right, and that also sort of bleeds into zoning regulations for small businesses. And so now, you know, there can be different levels of ordinances that govern how you can, or the parameters of that small business operation in that community. So there are avenues, but none of them are easy because it takes time to get new zoning ordinances passed as well. And they have to be well-written, and they have to stand up to the challenges in court. So due diligence and being thoughtful.
So also along these lines, we're talking about local ordinances, and I know that there have been ideas about statewide governance of short-term rentals and all, rather than local, so there would be an issue there. But related to this legislation, does it propose a one-size-fits-all requirement for septic construction and for inspections? Or because our land is so different from the sandy areas, and sometimes we have mining areas where there's more rock and minerals and all. Is it one size fits all for all of this, Beth?
It's not intended to be.
Is it Seth or Beth?
Either way.
This is
Go
fun. I'll go first, Seth, and then you can respond. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
I'm going to say that no, there isn't a one size fits all. This is where training comes in, right, for your inspectors. And we also have to appreciate the fact that we're not just talking about homes when we talk about septic systems. There are many very large commercial sized septic systems. There are community septic systems where several homes in a block, for example, will share the same on-site wastewater management system. Schools, hospitals, businesses have independent septics that have to manage large volumes of water regardless of bedroom size. I mean, I talked to the home when I did my delivery, but in my much longer talks, I also include, golf courses and schools and in hospitals and nursing homes and all of those areas that are businesses that have large commercial scale systems. And regardless of the soil type or geology, that requires another level of training for installers and inspectors to help manage. So that's my answer to that.
To that point, in the proposed bills, that's one of the big reasons for this technical advisory committee. Legislators, it's simply beyond their capability to be able to say, here's the range of kind of sites and technologies that we're going to have to deal with. The bill clearly provides for dealing with alternative systems, but it really viewed this advisory committee as the place where all of those kind of details would get defined.
Thank you. This is for Tricia. The town of Cedar in Leelanau County needs to address their failing septic systems for residences. how can they get funding to be able to afford this? The sludge hammer system seems to be the best. Maybe you could tell us what a sludge hammer system is.
I don't know what a sledgehammer system is. I
don't think I wanna know.
Whispered under his breath, "Good luck."
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Bacteria into the tank, so it's just an alternative treatment system. It's like having a small wastewater treatment plant.
yeah.
Excuse me, I'm going to repeat that for the microphone so that everybody can hear. I'm going to say something like what you did. A sludge hammer system, it brings oxygen into the breakdown system in the tank, so it's more like having your own little septic treatment plant right on site. Thank you for that.
There are no real funding sources out there right now to fund the kind of problems that you're talking about. There are ways to get at it using things like the drain code, but that isn't a funding source. Projects under the drain code, I think Northport used the drain code to develop their sewage system. But it's paid for by assessments, special assessments back to all the people that benefit from it. So it isn't some outside source of funds. There just isn't one right now.
And you bring up a really good point that I was getting at when I digressed into phosphorus and nitrogen. Traditional septic systems don't treat everything. So really what we need, I think, to move beyond the septic system and develop better alternative treatment systems. So, like the sledgehammer.
And so I would avoid using that myself because that is a brand name of a product.
Oh, okay.
And so there are other alternative
Yes.
systems that will incorporate air or agitation into your tanks. And these generate by doing that, it generates a different kind of bacteria breakdown, presumably faster. But you're also talking about a system that's going to be running 24/7 using some kind of electricity plus pumps that can break down. And now we're looking at higher dollars invested in these kinds of systems. And so I wouldn't recommend a system like that, except maybe in a situation where you don't have the room for a larger drain field. That's an alternate system. And then you might need to apply for a variance to get that installed. So
In Leelanau County, they don't allow for holding tanks anymore. So people are required to do these alternate treatment systems of a variety of types.
Okay, we have time for just two more questions. And the first one, are there any areas in Michigan where it would make sense to focus dollars and resources to go to city sewers? Who wants to take that one?
Well, there's a lot of places in Michigan where local sewering would be very helpful, but dollars is a pretty limiting factor. Sewer systems are pretty expensive to build. The biggest investment happening right now is in some of the bigger urban areas where that had combined sewers, which are a big source when you have, especially now that we're getting more and more serious rain events, you're getting more and more combined sewer overflows of untreated sewage into the waterways. And the only solution to that is to separate the sewer systems or to create enough stormwater detention that you can keep it from discharging so you can treat it when conditions are better. Very, very expensive. There have been some state and federal money invested in all of that. I'm not aware of too much right now that's available for local sewer system construction.
Thank you. Now, this is a yes or no question. We'll see what the answer will be. Will the proposed legislation take the place of point of sale point of sale inspections for real estate transactions?
Yes, the bill would eliminate all of those point-of-sale ordinances.
Very good. I have about a dozen more questions here. I'm sure some of you do too, and I hope that our panelists can stay after a little bit if you have a pressing question. Otherwise, you'll have to call your county health department and ask. Thank you so much, and Eunice is going to wrap up here.
Thank you so much, Seth and Tricia and Beth. This has been so vital, so important, and so interesting. We hope the movement continues in coming to terms with this vital situation. I have other thanks, and that is to our audience for tuning in today. Thanks to Josh Denby from Traverse Area District Library, to Matt Kern and Joe Torrance from the Traverse Area Community Media. Special thanks to our own Resources Environment Committee from our league for bringing this information to us. Please complete the evaluation forms, which should be somewhere coming to you. To find out more about our league or join, please visit our website at leagueofwomen'svotersgrandtraversearea.org. I should mention our upcoming programs, but we're not. We're having holidays over November and December, and please look for our programs again in January that will be coming up. Tell your friends that this program is available through the League of Women Voters Grand Traverse and on Spectrum Cable TV Channel 189 in Northwest Michigan, and the Traverse Area Community Media website live stream www.tacmtv Community TV Now. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your involvement in this, and thank you for your wonderful participation.